Quick disclaimer, COVID-19's effect on the artist community can't be explained by looking at one section of society. I can't claim that my findings are true for the artists of the world, or even the United States for that matter. Every region has different norms and resources available to them. Keeping that in mind, this study can, however, claim to better understand the hardships and resources available to the smaller midwestern communities in North America. With this knowledge, the insights depicted should show the impacts of pandemic life in rural America for artists. Throughout this year, we have seen so much. Our economy crashing, the entire world questioning the validity of our government's interventions, wondering if our neighbors have our backs, or if it's every person for themselves. The constant disillusioned security in our own communities has every human on edge. It is extremely hard for people to find a saving grace in these hard times. When available, many people turn to art. But like most programs not involving the physical health of our population right now, funding for the arts is usually the first to go. To put into perspective, a study written by arts.gov from 2009 states that there are over 2 million full-time artists in America, and that's just the workforce of artists that are getting paid a living wage. Another study written by Digital Music News from 2014 states that 91% of all artists are completely undiscovered. IFPI, a company that tracks music standards and norms around the world, claims that there are over 13 million artist pages just on Facebook alone. If we cross-reference both of these statistics, we can see that there are potentially over 11 million artists that are struggling to gain a steady income within their chosen profession. This is a very underrepresented number since not everyone uses Facebook. There are most likely some artists that still prefer not to use the internet at all. Looking a bit closer at our current situation regarding the biggest pandemic in human history, or at least since the 1900s, I scavenged the communities of the Cowboy State in order to get a better understanding on how rural artists are perceiving and handling COVID-19.
COVID has hit our state significantly, right? I mean, it's impacting all different sectors, all different individuals, old and young and everyone in between. And that definitely includes the arts and cultural sector across the state. So if you think about the Bureau of Economic Analysis, places Wyoming, somewhere around 10 to 11,000 people in Wyoming are considered arts and cultural workers. And of that 10 and 11,000 people, it makes up about 4.2% of employment across the state.
Enter the Wyoming Arts Council, and more specifically, their executive director, Michael Lang. Established in 1967, the Wyoming Arts Council intends to provide leadership while investing state-sponsored resources to sustain, promote, and cultivate excellence in the arts. So, what are they currently up to?
We'll be starting in January a once a month online professional development for arts administrators and for artists across the state to help them deal with what's going on with COVID. Recently, there's been a study done on arts and cultural workers across the country, and using that data, there's an estimation that there's 30% of all artists in Wyoming are completely out of work right now. So, my guess is that number is probably significantly higher, but you take 10 to 11,000 arts and cultural workers and you figure they're possibly 30% of them out of work right now. That's a huge number. Where is there that we can make efficiencies? Where can we make efficiencies across state government? Where can we make cuts that'll have the least amount of impact to the community that you just can't? I hear people say sometimes we just need to, cut around the fat of the edges of the budget and the places where we're not being very efficient. And I know from my work in state government, that has already been done. That was done in the last round of cuts that happened in 2016. So these cuts are going to cut deep, and they're going to impact every citizen, I think, across the state. And there is no way around that without looking at ways to bring in revenue to the state budget. A strong education in visual, performing, and literary arts is key ways to help build critical thinking skills and creativity amongst students that are inherent to the work of the arts, but are not necessarily taught across other disciplines inside of education. So these programs are crucial to the development of our students. And when you start talking about middle school and high school students, students going into the workforce, in a 21st century, two of the most sought after skills for individuals entering the workforce are critical thinking and creativity. And those are skills that are not necessarily taught in business school and are not necessarily taught across other disciplines. So the arts are really a crucial driver to helping build our, our 21st century workforce. I've always loved the idea of what if we could use a gross domestic happiness scale instead of a gross domestic product scale to think about how well is our country doing, right? How well is our state doing? And I think the arts play a very strong role in the social and emotional well-being of individuals. The arts help us understand the communities we're in, help us understand complicated issues, open the door for discussions that the door wouldn't be open for unless it was an artist, using their skill set to help us talk about complicated issues. So.
Talking with a large state-sponsored entity was nice, but I was also curious about how the businesses that they sponsor are handling this pandemic. I decided to look into a business closer to home, in a town called Gillette, AVA Arts, a nonprofit visual arts center focused on three important factors: inspiring artists, connecting artists to opportunities, and creating spaces for artists to explore their creative expression. Through these three pillars, they hope to partner with numerous organizations within the community by providing diverse programming, advocating art awareness, and sharing visual arts opportunities.
I think everyone can agree that it's super heavy, and I worry so much for my community, and especially, living in a region where it's been a really tense topic. It's been kind of a partisan topic. That's been really sometimes hard to cope with. But long term, I try to be optimistic, and I view this pandemic as an opportunity.
This right here is Quinn Goldhammer, the current acting director of AVA Arts Center in Gillette, Wyoming. Since we heard a perspective from a business that gives out grants to local art nonprofits, I thought it would be valuable to hear from one of these receiving nonprofits.
Just thinking about artists, I think that it could be interesting to see what artists, how they continue to react, what they continue to make, thinking about this really heavy time. But yeah, I'd be dishonest to say that I don't also really worry about artists, about the state of visual arts in our community and the arts in general. I think that it's pretty obvious if you look at how our world has handled the closures and working from home, that people have very heavily relied on media content and visual arts, performance arts. There's a lot of coping strategies right there. We have some ideas and some strategies for, virtual programming to still engage with folks in the community. Last time we did pretty cool thing. We did these drop-off kits where we built supply kits for folks, and they just had to purchase them through our website, and then we dropped them off on their front door. So trying to kind of build that program out. But there's just like this ethical back and forth because, on a personal level, I would feel so horrible if we, on any level, were a spreader event, and so it's tricky. I don't know where the balance is.
Hopefully down the road, there will be some understanding amongst our elected officials that not only are the arts, they enrich our culture and they bring culture into our community, but they're like in Wyoming, they're a really viable opportunity for economic diversity, right? In the local community, there's always that first level of cuts. And for some reason, sometimes we're tied into that. So it's probably, again, about educating our elected officials and our community members about the importance of the arts in our community, not only for, the educational opportunities, but also, I think, a valid economic resource as well. Yeah, you can't even think about taking those type of opportunities on and giving back to your community if you can't even support yourself and your lifestyle, and I think that's the continual artist plight, right? Is your friends and family always want things for free, and it's like, how do you educate people to understand, like, not only is this expensive to produce, it's also like emotionally expensive to produce. It's a very personal process, creating art, and putting yourself out there is extremely vulnerable. And so I think people take that for granted, especially, I sound like a broken record because I'm like, you have to value your art. You have to value your art. If you price your stuff too low right now to accommodate a buyer's market, then you can never, ever get what you deserve out of it. Because you're like, it's so hard to elevate your pricing. That's a tricky thing to navigate. There's like this intangible component, which is like, people think that the day you show up and produce your art, that's all you're trying to encompass. But it's like the hours and the money invested to get to that point in your skill level. How do you even begin to value that? I think that is so tricky. It's like, I didn't just like learn this in a vacuum. I didn't learn this overnight. This has taken probably some sort of formal education and a lot of honing. And it's hard.
There's always two sides to every story. Some will look at a tough situation and claim that this is their motivation to persevere and push even harder forward than they have in the past. Others will say the circumstances they have been dealt are the very reason they have given up on a dream. The reason they are no longer able to push forward. The cost of fighting for their art begins to outweigh the amount of stress it seems to be worth. Encouragement in a world of discouraged humans and depleted resources can seem daunting, but we must choose a path and know that neither will be a surefire way to accomplish our dreams. If there is one agreeable opinion to have in times where there are so many ideas that oppose each other, is that in the midst of adversity and inevitable change, the biggest fear we should have is in our inability to recognize our shortcomings. No matter if we are talking about politics, healthcare, racism, classism, or art, the more conversations we have about the potential issues that we deal with now or in the future will be the very reason that we are able to overcome that exact problem in a shorter amount of time. The issues that we are able to understand today are only visible because of someone's past conversations of a potentially offensive perspective. Art has and will always find a way to be offensive and uncomfortable to someone. But in a lot of cases, art in some form is the very reason a message was shouted out or understood. Art has faced a type of struggle that is confusing to understand. It is the first thing to get cut from programs due to its lack of importance, yet most everyone finds solace in its involvement in society. It brings people together and reminds us of moments in time. It teaches us lessons and it humbles us. Some even gain their only sense of self and relaxation from it. So, like stated before, when certain artistic mediums are taken away, society is forced to decide. Give up this expression, or find new and inventive ways to reach the people calling for more. I know what I'm doing. What about you?
There are times that I find myself falling for the humors of this world, to be pulled from side to side as if I'm a piece of clay meant for molding the agenda of this hive of minds we sometimes find comfort inside. But I am not I, and you are no more you than me. As this illusion passes me by, I've come to know there is only so much that we can see. tonight for you. The nightmares of my past lives that I can't choose. I won't go to sleep tonight for you. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I can't seem to remember where I placed my agenda.